Onward. And next chapter is Childeric the Third. Now I still have this up, but I am going to take it away. We were at here's Childeric the Third here. There is this mention of Thierry the Second, but the last chapter I have in this book is Thierry the Fourth. So possibly there's a change in the name there. But right here we have Childeric the Third, being the roi, the 22nd roi de France. And, well, he looks a little angry in that one, but who knows? These are also, humorous, made, humorous intent as well, illustrations. But he does have the longest dress of all, with a little bit of ruffle on the bottom, which is quite cute. They do look a little effeminate in their dresses, but I think they're fine. And then next we have Pépine and Charlemagne. Now I'm a little confused there because they were saying Pépine and Charlemagne. Pépine was given the name of Charlemagne, so perhaps there's another Charlemagne, like perhaps that was his father or something, and this would be Pépine's son, a Charlemagne. And anyway, next we have the Louis and then a Charles. But never is it the Duke Charles. The Duke Charles has done a whole bunch, hasn't he? He's taken France. He's really conducted wars. He made the knights, the Jeannettes, the knights, the 16 knights, who wear fantastic jewelry. And unfortunately, I have not been able to find it. It's probably in a museum somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it online. I do have this page, though. Now, this is just a regular lookup of the Merovingian jewelry. And it's not just the jewelry, it's the treasures. So if you look at Merovingian, if you look at Merovingian jewelry, you'll get jewelry of today made by artisans of today. So if you look up treasures, you'll find a page similar to this. And these are really the treasures that probably, some were maybe even stolen from Italy, because this looks more Italian in a way, because it's so refined. And yet, when we're looking at, yes, coins, brooches, all kinds of things. Over here's got a chalice, a golden chalice. Now, are these the vases they were discussing? Because they were talking vases, that they had 70 vases that they were looking for at one point. And look at the little treasure box up there. The actual jewelry itself is it's almost crude. If you see that right there, it's almost crude how it's done. It's never really straight. It's a little bulbous, and you could almost say, but then it does have refines. Look how tiny and refined that is there. So in some portions of it becomes very refined. And yet there's other that are a little clunky. I'll say clunky. Yeah, clunky gold. So the gold was clunky. Pretty. You're thinking Renaissance, but this is not. This is medieval time. Still the Merovingian medieval dynasty. Okay. And here they have a goblin. Apparently, they're still trying to push paganism during this time. And we know the paganism has been really, it's been kicked out of power. So if there was paganism existing, in a secret on the side, it was, it was not mainstream. It wasn't where the mainstream money was. The mainstream money. Do I have my... See, I have to put that on. If I look over there, you see my prominent nose. Oh, don't show off your prominent nose. Don't show it off. It's a secret. Alright, look at that. Luxembourg. Ancient treasure. And you can see the swords. Quite interesting, isn't it? They did go to quite a bit of length. Still, it a little bit looks Celtic, probably because there's been so much Celtic jewelry made and all of that. But and this is a new one they found or whatever in a museum. It's quite intricate, and they're using, it's a kind of an inlay. This is possibly an enamel of some sort. Another chalice. So, and what was that? A certain Hu gold. That was something worn and out. It has prongs in it, and that was possibly on your wrist or an anklet or something. Maybe a slave had to wear that. Oh, that's too Arabian, maybe. Yeah, but here you go. Yeah, this is classic clunky, isn't it? The classic clunky look. And there they are, a wine jug, a Merovingian wine jug on this history blog. So they are definitely the Valley of the Wine. That's funny because when I said my name a long time ago, I was Thérèse Evaud de la Fontaine Berry, which stood for the Valley of the Fountain of Wine, the valleys of the fountains of wine. So, and there was the wine jug. Yeah, wine was major. If you're in France, wine is major. It's just, you know, there's a certain area where the grapes grow, and they flourish. And without those grapes, you know, they would have to depend on water. You know, and what if the water was not that great? Wine was always a safe bet. Well, unless it got too acidic. Oh, we got a cross here. But yeah, so we're thinking about the churches being for almost 100 or 200 years, the churches themselves being like a Vatican each, where all the treasures and all of the booty that they stole in all of their wars, whether they're from Germany or whether from Spain or whether from, you know, the Italians, ended up in the churches, you know, and even turned into other things. So, yeah, look at that. Whoa, that's quite something, isn't it? I don't know how they felt about vampires and that type of thing. I think that was more really going over in the Slavic side. They did but definitely believe that the tomb of that one guy was the abyss of hell if you opened it. So that meant that they were walking on heaven already. So here we are. Well, I don't know, maybe they still believed in earth. Here we are, treasures in heaven. Look at that. I mean, they're just pirates, really. Look at that. That was a treasure chest of gold. And vases and chalice and jewelry, just endless. And like they were saying, the knights had to wear the specific necklaces, which were quite thick, heavy chains, 3 heavy chains, very thick, with a solid gold ornament hanging from the whole mess of it. So I don't know, they didn't mention a ring for the knights, and I did try to look up the knights. I have not found any of them in the costume mentioned in this book, but you know, that's just because it's internet, and maybe they didn't know about it really, or go on about it and say, well, okay, so here we are. And yeah, they're using, oftentimes they're using the gold for buckles, or gold was just prevalent apparently. Alright, so I think I'm done with the seek through. I'll try to leave this somewhere. Oh my god, did I have, there are some really good maps. I probably should leave it on a good map. I don't think I have a good map handy though right now. And well, the Dragon of the End of Time site. Yeah, the Dragon of the End of Time, House of Merovingian. They do try to romanticize the whole mess of it. Some of these sites, and good for them, you know, if they make money through that process, that's great. But then they're doing other things. Okay. And there's loads and loads of videos online. Of course, you can always watch those. Okay, well, I've got to get back to the book though. And where am I? I'll just leave you with the chalice. That's fine. All right. Back to Childeric III. There've been so many Childerics. 743 AD. According to an ancient genealogical table of the kings of France, he was son of Thierry of Chelles. He only reigned over Neustria, Burgundy, and Provence, Carloman reserving Austrasia as an independent principality, which he governed himself. The tributary princes, still obeying with regret the children of Charles Martel, entered into a fresh league in order to shake off the authority of Pepin and Carloman. But the Alemanni, Bavarians, and Saxons were successfully reduced to obedience, as with the Hunald, Duke of Aquitaine. In 744, this last prince, entertaining some suspicions of his brother's fidelity, ordered his eyes to be put out, and being afterwards stricken with remorse for the barbarous act, resigned his dominions to his son Godfrey and retired to the convent. So he blinded his brother, then off to the convent he went. Far different were the motives which influenced Carloman to embrace a life of religious solitude. Even in the moment of triumph, in the midst of successive victories, he conceived the design of secluding himself from the follies and vices of the world. In the silent gloom of a cloister, he accordingly repaired to Rome, where he received the monastic habit from the hands of Pope Zachary, who assigned him a place in the Benedictine abbey of Mount Cassine. In 748, Pepin, now who has become sole master of the monarchy, released his brother Griffon from confinement, loaded him with caress, and assigned him an apartment in his palace, with a pension suitable of his rank. Intent on promoting the happiness of the people, he established tribunals in every part of the kingdom for the most speedy and effectual redress of grievances. He fought to conciliate esteem by protecting religion, rewarding merit, defending innocence, and punishing oppression. In this state of grandeur, of glory, and of power, Pepin entertained serious thoughts of uniting in himself the authority and title of king. But his schemes suffered a temporary interruption from the ambition of Griffon, who suddenly withdrew from court, accompanied by a number of the young nobility, and taking refuge among the Saxons, once more excited that people to revolt. So the Saxons are getting ready to revolt again. The army of Pepin, however, again proved triumphant. The Saxons were routed, and their Duke Theodoric was taken prisoner. On the death of Odilon, Duke of Bavaria, his sceptre had devoted on his infant son Tassilo, and his widow Hiltrud readily offered an asylum to her and her half-brother, the fugitive Griffon. Assisted by a strong body of malcontent, the malcontented French, the perfidious suppliant seized his sister and her son, and usurped the dukedom of Bavaria. But his transient power vanished on the approach of Pepin. Tassilo was restored to his dominions, and Griffon again pardoned by his brother, again endeavoured to awake the dormant embers of faction, and escaping from the city of Mons, sought protection in the court of the Duke of Aquitaine. The Duke of Aquitaine, apparently. Luckily he was there. As this last attempt of Griffon was followed by an interruption of the public tranquillity, Pepin renewed his project for ascending the throne. The chief obstacle to his elevation arose from the oath of fidelity which the French had taken to Childeric. This impediment Pepin undertook to remove, though the means which he adopted for this purpose are variously related. The generality of writers pretend that being this allured of the favour, esteem, and suffrages of the nation, he proposed to them to consult Pope Zachary. So in 750 AD, he replied that being already in possession of the regal authority, he might certainly assume the title of king. Not the Pope Zachary, I don't believe. No, that would be he was giving advice to Pepin, I believe. Yeah, so there they are. The popes are giving advice and saying, well, you can be king now. We think so. The people were accordingly persuaded. He might certainly assume the title of king. The people were persuaded that this declaration was sufficient to release them from the obligation of their oath, and Pepin was proclaimed a king. There are others, on the contrary, who affirm that Childeric, impressed with an earnest desire of embracing a religious life, voluntarily, and with the consent of his principal vassals, abdicated the throne, by which means the right of electing a new sovereign reverted to the people, who unanimously conferred that dignity on Pepin. This last account, if not the most true, is at least the most honourable to the Pope, the new monarch, and the nation. It exculpates Zachary from the charge of prevarication. So his brother maybe just didn't want to be king, he just wanted to be religious all of a sudden. That's another way of looking at it, that it could have happened. This last, prevarication, in taking advantage of the religious prejudices of the people. So, in order to sanction an act of injustice, it clears Pepin from that of usurpation, and oppression of his lawful sovereign, and it fully acquits the nation of crimes of perjury and treason. Whatever was the real state of the case, how he became king, it is certain that Childeric descended from the throne and retired to the monastery in Cethieux. He did not survive his deposition more than 3 or 4 years. He had one son named Thierry, who lived and died in a state of obscurity at the Abbey of Fontenelle, now Saint-Vandrille. In 751, thus finished the Merovingian race. Are we getting sad, teary-eyed? Which had reigned 333 years. There is something said about threes, isn't there? From Pharamond, and 270 from the ascension of Clovis. It gave 36 monarchs to France. 36. 21 of which reigned over Paris. That 21 over Paris. The 4 first were pagans. So there were a few pagans, but not for the most of it. The 4 first 4. The others Christians, but rather in name than in manners. Till the reign of Clotaire II, cruelty, ferociousness, barbarism were generally prevalent. More mildness, religion, and goodness appeared under the later monarchs. All right, so here they are. In the beginning, barbarism. And now we have, till the reign of, we have more mildness. Yeah, till the reign of Clotaire II. It was all cruelty. And then later on, we're having mildness, religion, goodness. It just appeared under the later monarchs. And to those qualities, indeed, may be ascribed the destruction of the race. The daring projects of ambition being encouraged by meekness, and only repressed by exertions of severity. So they really lost themselves because in a way they became too nice, too good, too holy, and too religious. The characters of the Merovingian princes, as portrayed by those who wrote all the commencement of the second race of kings, must be read with caution and mistrust. In order to justify the usurpation of Pepin, the Merovingians have been ascribed by all the calamities of the empire, while they have imputed to the Carlovingians here, not Carolingians, the Carlovingians, every national improvement, all the good that was done during their government of the kingdom under the title of mayors of the palace. So next we're heading on to more of Pepin, the second, or the Carlovingian race. This is it. The Merovingians are done. They were too nice in the end. They stopped having, more bloody wars, I suppose. They became too nobilized and not, more fashionable in a way. Less, they've lost their barbarian, definitely. And so, forth we go. We have a 751. The deplorable end of the Merovingian race affords one of those examples which are not less common than dreadful, of the instability of human affairs, the antiquity of its origin, traced to the very earliest times, the splendor of its exploits, the number of its victories, the extent of its conquests, the habitual respect of the nation, and the natural attachment of the French to their lawful sovereigns, all proved insufficient to endure and ensure its duration. Pepin was crowned at Soissons in a general assembly of the nation. A contemporary author observes that Queen Bertha was, according to ancient custom, placed by his side on the throne. But it is remarkable that this is the first mention of such a custom to be found in history. But it is, so we got a woman there also. Whence we are induced to believe that it was an innovation adopted either for the purpose of rendering his inauguration more memorable, or else to inspire the people with a greater degree of respect for the children which that the princess had borne him. Actuated by the same principle, he resolved to receive the sacred unction from the hands of Boniface, Archbishop of Mayence, and the Pope's legate, by which means he led the people to regard his election as an order from heaven, and acquired additional veneration to his person, and respect to his power. This ceremony, hitherto unknown in France, was performed in the cathedral at Soissons, and was found to be productive of so many advantages that all the successors of Pepin followed his example. We now have king and queen on the throne, except Louis the Debonair, or also gentle, who, being ordered by his father Charlemagne to go and take the crown from the great altar in the church of Aix-la-Chapelle, put it on his head, and without any farther consecration was acknowledged king of the whole monarchy. So he went about it a little differently. The ceremony of consecration was formally performed by the metropolitan of the province in which the new monarch was crowned. Philippe I, of his name, was also the first king who was consecrated at Rheims. The rite of consecration was afterwards claimed by the bishops of Rheims, but it was not confirmed to them till the reign of Louis the Young. In 752 AD, the commencement of this new reign was distinguished by a signal defeat of the Saxons, who had again revolted, and were again reduced to submission and compelled to pay an annual tribute of 300 horses. The Britons experienced a similar fate. During this expedition he was delivered from the active enmity of an implacable relation by the death of Griffon, who was slain in the valley of Maurienne. It is not known whether he was killed by the emissaries of the Duke or, it would be of the Duke of Aquitaine, in revenge of the criminal intercourse which he maintained with his wife, or by assassins hired by Pepin himself, who was fearful that if he passed into Italy he would induce the Lombards to espouse his quarrel, pushing him into further war. In 754, the kingdom of the Lombards, which from the royal residence of Paris extended to the gates of the ancient capital, oppressed the waning strength and feeble age of Rome. Astrophilos, the sovereign of that hostile nation, had possessed himself of Ravenna, and extinguished in Italy the nominal authority of Emperor of the East. Rome was menaced by the victorious Lombard, and the life of each citizen was fixed at the annual tribute of a piece of gold. The Roman pontiff had in vain endeavored to depreciate the injustice of his enemy. With fearful speed he traversed the Pennine Alps and implored the protection of the French monarchy. He was lodged in the Abbey of Saint-Denis and treated with the very possible mark of respect. At the request of Pepin, Stephen solemnly placed the diadem upon his head, bestowed the regal unction on his sons, Charles and Carloman, and conferred on the three princes the title of Patrician of Rome. Pepin's first care, after his new consecration, was to assemble a parliament at Crécy upon Oise, in order to declare war against the Lombards. But he was extremely surprised to see his brother Carloman attend the assembly, who, after having been abdicated the throne, had assumed the monastic habit. He had abdicated, and he was basically a monk. Now he's come back. The king of Lombardy, who was afraid that Stephen would prevail on the French monarch to espouse his cause, had persuaded this prince to counteract his projects. The pious monk accordingly obeyed the orders of his sovereign in opposing the interest of the Pope. A recollection of his former dignity, his birth, and his virtues gave a great weight to his arguments. He spoke in favour of Astolphus, well, we'll say Astolphus with such strength and eloquence that it was determined to send ambassadors to that monarch to engage him in the adoption of pacific measures before the nation should arm. Before going to war, better visit him first. This proof of the influence which Carloman still possessed gave umbrage to Pepin, who, having conferred on the subject with the sovereign pontiff, sent him into close confinement at a monastery at Vienne, where he died that same year. The subsequent seizure of his children, who were immediately shaved and immured in a convent, gave birth to strange suspicions on his sudden death, and it was generally supposed that he had fallen a sacrifice to the fears and ambition of his brother. Okay. So next we have Astolphus. Okay, Astolphus. So I'm sorry, who died all of a sudden? Which brother was it? When I'm reading through this, I didn't catch it. Perhaps it was not Pepin, it was the other one, Carloman. Astolphus received the French ambassadors with proper respect and offered to forego his pretensions of Rome, but he refused to restore either the exarchate, the exarchate, the extra check, they're normally called, but yeah, or the Pentapolis, which the Pope claimed as the suicide of a heretic. Pepin, not content with this proposal, sent a second embassy, which did not prove more successful than the first. He then, accompanied by his two sons, made, with the consent of his nobles, that celebrated donation to the Church of St. Peter, which gave rise to the temporal power of the court of Rome. It comprised, under the name of the Exarchate, Ravenna, Adria, Ferrara, Imola, Faenza, Forli, and Fi, and 6 other towns, with their dependencies, and under that of the Pentapolis, Rimini, Pesaro, Fano, Sinigaglia, and Ancona, with several places of inferior note. Pepin's generosity in thus disposing of territories which did not belong to him is truly curious. He resolved, however, to acquire by conquest a right of disposal, and for this purpose he marched into Italy. Astolphus of Rome, and restored the Exarchate and the Pentapolis. The king of the French, exulting in the success of his expedition, repassed the Alps in triumph. So here he is giving away towns that weren't even apparently under his dominion. The satisfaction of Pepin was but of short duration. In 756 A.D., the retreat of the French dissipated the fears of Astolphus. He rejected the conditions which had been extorted from him, and already pressed with menaces and arms the independence of Rome. On the receipt of this intelligence, the son of Martel again resumed his armour, and the rapidity of his march was only to be equalled by that of his success. The distress of Stephen was relieved, and the perfidy of Astolphus chastised. The Lombard was a second time compelled to sue for peace, and to the former terms was added the stipulation of an annual tribute of 12,000 souls of gold. All right. So somebody's getting a lot of gold there. It was on Pepin's return from this expedition that he postponed the General Assembly from the 1st of March to the 1st of May, as cavalry began to be introduced into the French armies during his reign. The necessity of finding forage caused the diet to be thus delayed till a more commodious season of the year. They couldn't even eat, really. Pepin had now attained to the summit of glory, the crown of Lombardy, and had, on the death of Astolphus, through his intervention been conferred on Didier. The Pope was indebted to him for a considerable extent of territory, and the Emperor courted his favour, and spared no pains to secure his friendship. At this period he convened a parliament to Compiègne, at which some regulations were adopted with regard to marriage. The leprosy was adjudged a sufficient cause for dissolving a marriage, and the party who sued for the divorce was allowed to marry again. Chances are he had leprosy also. And this is interesting now. So going back real quick, Pepin gathering all those coins every year. The Pope is happy to pay him. So the people of Italy now have to pay taxes to Pepin through the Pope. Indirectly, just to keep everyone happy. So here we have the leprosy was an out. Next. Okay, so it appears from hence that this disorder was then very common. And now, when the assembly were about to separate, ambassadors arrived from Constantinople, loaded with the magnificent presents, among which was an organ, the first that had been seen in France. Pepin gave it to the church of Saint Cornille at Compiègne. At these advances, however, on the part of Constantine, Coprinius, were attended with no effect. The French monarch returned attention with attention, but persisted in securing to the Pope the possession of the Exarchat and the Pentapolis. On the death of Stephen, his brother Paul succeeded to the chair of St. Peter, and experienced from Pepin an equal degree of protection with his predecessor. The repose of France was again disturbed by a general revolt of the impatient Saxons. They've tried, don't they? They're giving horses away and all such, and they keep losing these revolts. Okay, but their endeavours to break only served to rivet their chains. They were speedily subdued and reduced to unconditional submission. This is like centuries of them trying and failing. The news of this success filled with the consternation of the enemies of Pepin. The king of the Sclavonians sent him an offer of tribute and acknowledged himself the vassal of France. The king of Lombardy, too, who had recently made an eruption into the papal territories, followed his example. 761 AD. This victorious march was everywhere successful. Narbonne, after revisiting the terrors of a blockade during 3 years, submitted to his domination on the sole condition of preserving the Roman laws, which its inhabitants had constantly followed, and which still prevail in Septimania. Gaffre, the Duke of Aquitaine, was the next that experienced his resentment. That prince, having usurped the possessions of several churches that were under the protection of France, Pepin summoned him to restore them, and on his refusal marched an army into his country and reduced him to submission. Gaffre, however, had again recourse to arms, and this second revolt produced a war which lasted some years, and at length terminated in 768. Yeah, it was a long time, about 7 years, in the death of Gaffre. So finally when he died, and in the reannexation of the Duchy of Aquitaine to the crown of France. During this contest, Taphilon, Duke of Bavaria, renounced his homage to the French king and prepared to assert by arms his claim of independence. But intimidated by the misfortunes of Gaffre, he was induced to seek a reconciliation, and by his ready submission disarmed the resentment of the victor. Soon after these achievements, Pepin was seized with a slow fever at Exante. He was conveyed with difficulty to Saint-Denis, and there expired of a dropsy in the 54th year of his age, and the 17th of his reign. He was interred at the place where he died, and was buried according to his own orders at the church door, with his face downwards, and in the posture of a penitent. By his wife Bertha, or Bertrude, daughter of Charibert, Count of Leon, he had 4 sons: Charlemagne, who succeeded to the kingdom of Neustria; Carloman, who governed Austrasia; Pepin, who died in his infancy; and Gilles, a monk in the monastery of Saint Sylvestre. He had also 3 daughters: Rothaid, we'll call her Rothaid, Adelaide, Giselle, and the 2 first died young. Oh, and the 3rd took the veil at the Abbey of Chelles. So Giselle was the one who lasted the longest. Pepin possessed great martial abilities and great political talents. Hence his skill and success were equal to the cabinet and the field. Under his auspices, France attained that strength and consequence which enabled his son to pursue his triumphant career of greatness, but amid splendor of his virtues, his vices and defects have been totally forgotten. Not one of his biographers has, In the delineation of his character, notice the assassination of Theodold, son of Grimiold, the despotic authority which he exerted over his lawful sovereign, the violation of his oath in deposing Childeric and taking possession of the throne, or the tyrannical confinement of his brother Carloman in a convent. These are weighty defects, and though opposed by many great and glorious actions, are surely sufficient not only to preclude indiscriminate commendation, but to command a considerable degree of censure. So they want to say he was great and all of this, but he has a few things, lingering there in the background. Pepin acquired the surname of Short, Pepin the Short, from his diminutive form, which became a subject of pleasantry to some of his courtiers. The king, being informed of their remarks, determined to convince them of their error. With this view, he caused a combat to be exhibited at the Abbey of Ferrières between a lion and a bull, the former having thrown down his adversary. Pepin turned to the noblemen who were present and asked which of them had courage enough to separate or kill the furious combatants. The bare proposal made them all shudder. Not a soul replied. "I will do it then myself," said the monarch calmly. He accordingly drew his sabre, leaped into the arena, attacked and killed the lion, and then turned to the bull, aimed so severe a blow at his head that he separated it from his body. The whole court was astonished at this prodigious exertion of courage and strength. The nobles who had indulged at this at their expense of the king were confounded. Pepin, turning towards them, exclaimed in a lofty tone, "David was small, but he overthrew the proud giant who had dared to treat him with contempt." This ferocious kind of amusement was common in these times. The kings not only exhibited combats of wild beasts to the people, but they frequently indulged themselves with this favourite diversion within the precincts of the palace. So somebody made fun of him that he was short, and so, well, he was going to show off that he was still strong in their eyes. The plenary courts, cours plénières, also formed one of their principal amusements. These were those famous assemblies which all the nobles were obliged to attend on an invitation from the king. They were holden twice a year, at Christmas and Easter, generally for the celebration of a marriage or some other great rejoicing. They lasted a week. The place in which they were holden was sometimes the royal palace, sometimes a celebrated city, and sometimes a vast plain, but always in a spacious place, capable of affording convenient accommodations for all of the nobility in the kingdom. The ceremony commenced by a solemn mass, and the priest who performed it before, oh my gosh, he performed it before he read the epistle, placed the crown on the king's head, which the monarch wore till he went to bed. And during the time of the festival, the king always dined in public, and those most distinguished dukes and prelates sat with him at the table. There was a second table for the abbots, counts, and other noblemen. Profusion, rather than delicacy, was the leading characteristic of both. On the removal of each course, the flutes and hautbois played. So they're playing flutes and oboe. When the entremets were served, 3 heralds at arms. I'm really going blind here. No, I'm not. It works. It does work. Oh my gosh! On the removal of each course, yes. So here they are. They're getting all their food. They have their flutes playing, oboes, hautbois. When the entremets was served, 3 heralds at arms, each with a rich cup in his hand, cried out 3 times, "Bounty of the most powerful king." The most powerful of king. So he is giving festivals for everyone. And then threw gold and silver to the people, who collected it with loud acclamations of joy. This distribution was announced and accompanied by a flourish of musical instruments. Here's money. Okay. The amusements of the afternoon consisted of fishing, gaming, hunting, rope dancing, juggling, sarce playing, and pantomimical representations. The pantomimes, or buffoons, are represented as possessed of admirable skill in training dogs, and also bears and apes, to acts of imitation and mimicry. These animals had parts assigned them in their different performances. Such was the taste of the times. Plenary courts were particularly in vogue during the reign of the Carlovingian monarchs. They were supported with unusual magnificence under Charlemagne, when they were attended by dukes and counts, who came from the farthest extremity of this vast empire, each accompanied by a brilliant court, and incurring an expense equal to that of his sovereign. This magnificence began to diminish from the time of Charles the Simple, the revenue of whose immediate successors were inadequate to support the expense of such splendid festivals. They were revived, however, by Hugh Capet, continued by Robert, and maintained in their pristine splendor by Saint Louis. Charles VII, finding them extremely burdensome to the state, finally abolished them. The abolition was prudent, since they led the nobility to ruin themselves at play, and the monarch to exhaust his treasures. At each of these festivals, the king was obliged to give new dresses to the officers of his household, as well as to those who belonged to the queen and princes. Thence came the word livery, because these dresses were delivered at the king's expense. In short, the whole expenses attending the plenary courts amounted to an immense sum. if there was any vessel on the sideboard of great value, or any scarce and curious jewel in the crown, custom required that the king should make it present of it to someone. So presents are going everywhere, and in the room of these plenary courts festivals were established, which, though devoid of that cumbrous magnificence that marked the former, were distinguished by the foster and more pleasing allurements of gallantry, politeness, and taste. So yeah, so they had these wild festivals, a lot was going on. They were the first circuses known. They're using apes and all kinds, bears and apes. And very, very interesting. And now next we're off to Charlemagne. Yeah, but not right now. I'll save that one for the next video.